And that's it. We are live. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for those of you joining us, those of you watching the replay. So excited to have this conversation with the fabulous Chris White. We met just last month, I think, maybe earlier this month at a networking event. And I immediately was like, we need to be friends because he works with attorneys. I work with attorneys. We do very different things for the law firms. But we noticed there's a lot of synergy in how we help our law firms strategize around how they're communicating. So I help, Chris does law firm recruiting. So Chris, before we go any further, I'm very excited and want to jump into the conversation. But before we do that, why don't you tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Allison. And yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you and getting to know you. And I'm really excited to have this conversation today. My name is Chris White. I am the founder of Navigate Legal Search, which is a boutique legal search firm in Chicago. So I help law firms and in-house legal departments locate legal talent, and I also help attorneys who are seeking new opportunities. I actually am a former practicing attorney as well. So I like to say that I have an insight to know what it's like to work and practice law as well in law firms. So.
Yeah. Excellent. So when you and I were talking the other day, we got to talking about how people communicate with, I talk about as far as marketing goes, communicate how you're communicating externally, but you were talking about how it's also really important to communicate with your employees and with your potential employees and how that all has to be aligned with what you're actually trying to accomplish as a law firm. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about this even before our conversation today. And, it's funny, and this is probably true in a lot of industries, but in the legal industry, probably a lot of it is communication, right? Like how effective our communication is really a huge part of the practice of law and a huge part of the business of law as well. Mm-hmm. So, when I think about it from a law firm perspective internally, communicating what your needs are and making sure there's alignment internally is an initial step. And, I'm an external recruiter, so I'm only privy to certain conversations I have with firms, but internally, there has to be buy-in. That's one thing. And then not only buy-in, but what are we looking for? And making sure that those goals are aligned and where are we flexible? And then I could go on and on about this. So I'm sure we'll want to pause and we can approach each of these, but whether it's a job description, which is a little internal and external, or whether it's, what is our secret sauce? This is one of the most important things that I think is needs to be internally communicated and aligned before going externally to the market. Mm-hmm. And because, when you're seeking talent, it's hard to ascertain from a lot of external resources what's different about one firm compared to another, right? Yeah. They all have websites. They all kind of can start to look the same. And one of the most valuable conversations I can have with potential candidates is, why is this a unique opportunity? What makes this special? So sorry, I gave you a lot there. I could go on and on about this, but I hope that that's a hopeful starting point.
Yeah, no, don't apologize. That was an excellent answer. And I do want to dive deeper, starting with the fact that it's both internal and external. Can you dive into that a little bit more? Oh, Chris, I just lost your audio.
Sorry, I think. Hold on one sec. Let's see if I can get this back.
I can hear you now.
Can you?
Yes. Nope, I just lost you again. Nope, now you're muted.
Issues here. I think I'm back, hopefully.
I can hear you now. Yes.
After all of this, still tech issues. So what can you do? But yeah, I think a great example of this, let's just start with an example, which is a job description, right? Mm-hmm. And what does that job description entail? Which is partially, while it's an external communication in a sense, right? Because you're going to the market trying to attract talent. There the internal alignment in that job description as well. This is a real opportunity for law firms to distinguish themselves that I don't think they're taking at this point, because most of the time job descriptions tend to look very similar.
Yeah.
I think there's a flight to safety, right? It's a risk aversion to look too different in that. So internally, teams can align, and instead of coming at from you need to have X, and this is why. I have seen, we're a 1,000-person law firm. We do all these wonderful things. What are you providing to the candidate? What value can you give? What is the distinguishing attributes that you have for that role that internally need to be communicated initially, so there can be alignment, so that they can go externally to the market and make sure that that description matches with what they're really thinking.
I love that, because does that ring true to me as a marketer? I get so frustrated with every website that I see that says we have this many clients and we've brought in this many dollars for our clients, and it's always the total dollar amount, right? It's not even an average win for our clients. It's like, this is the number of dollars we've brought in for clients. It's like, that doesn't actually tell me anything. The number of clients, the number of years you've been in business, the number of lawyers you have, does not tell me anything about what it's like to work with you. It doesn't tell me anything about what results you're going to get from me as a client. And the same for a candidate, a job candidate. Like, okay, that's nice. What is it like to work with you? Does that mean that I'm going to get lost in the shuffle and I'm on my own? Is there going to be a mentorship program? And am I going to have someone guiding me through? Am I going to have someone that I'm like teamed up with and partnered up with? Or am I just, okay, it's a big pond. Good luck.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And it's funny. And I understand there's challenges here, because a lot of times this may take work, right, to uncover what the secret sauce is. And maybe everybody doesn't agree what that secret sauce is. It can be different for everybody. But I think that once you talk and communicate effectively internally, you'll really uncover some unique attributes. I remember talking to a firm where it was just a generic job posting, right? And I spoke with the internal recruiter, and they're like, oh my gosh, this attorney will be working with this partner, and she is fantastic. She's an all-star. She's an up-and-comer. She blah, 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 blah. It was nowhere in the job description, right? Like, that unique attribute was just missing. So if you're a candidate, my assumption is they probably lost on some talent that they would have otherwise gained, because they weren't able to effectively communicate that both internally or externally. Or they were communicating it internally, obviously, because it came to me, but not kind of taking that externally.
Awesome.
So, and even like internally communications, it doesn't just have to be written words, right? Like, how does the interview process align? And, sometimes there's no real, it depends, right? Well, if you're able to get alignment and communicate that process internally initially, it really can help the process, because speed, which is an external communication and an internal communication. If you have an aligned process, a recruiting process, and you're like, okay, there's going to be this many rounds. These are the people that we need this person to meet to make a decision. This is kind of the rough timeline that we think. Obviously things can happen, right? But this is approximate timeline. When a candidate moves through that process, it's going to be so much smoother for them. And it's also going to be probably faster. And, in sales, there's a common phrase, time kills deals, right? Yes. So if you're able to have that communication internally aligned, again, not a written word necessarily, but still really, really important to convey, and can really lead to an effective recruiting process.
I love that, because again, I say the same thing all the time when it comes to marketing. If your marketing is aligned and it's really strong, and you know who your ideal clients are, and you're effectively attracting and engaging them, that sales process is so much easier and so much faster. I know it because I've done it myself when I do my own sales calls, and someone is like, oh yeah, I saw this on your blog. Now I want to do this with you. What's the next step? Like, we skip so many steps in the sales process because my marketing covered that for me. And it's so helpful. So I appreciate that you brought up the fact that it can be the same way in your recruiting process, when that messaging is on point and you're bringing in the right candidates, not just any candidate with the right skills, but who are the right people for this role, so much more important. And I'm glad you touched on earlier the secret sauce and how do we define that, which I thought was great, because I wanted to follow up with you on that. Is we all have our own secret sauce, but pulling that out of someone, I don't think I can say what my secret sauce is, even though that's my job. You probably can't say what your secret sauce is, but we could probably look at someone else and be like, that's your secret sauce. That's it right there. So what's your process for kind of pulling that out of your clients?
I would say it's conversations, right? And conversations, which is communication. And, we're talking about written communication, oral communication. We're talking about communication conveyed in different ways through speed. So there's a lot of different types of communication in this process. But these conversations, I've been doing this long enough where I am like, aha, right? Like, that's different. That's unique. And you start to uncover that. And the most effective conversations I have with law firms are not only with internal recruiters, which a lot of which are fantastic and probably know more about the firm than most of the attorneys practicing, right? Because they can have a more holistic view of the process, but also talking with practicing partners in the group. I'll uncover something where it's like, well, our finance group really leans heavy on, this particular and this would be a really valuable skill. And this is why, where, again, the job description, it's one of several types of skills that they're seeking. But, I've uncovered something, and this is the reason why. And this is a particular client that we're really growing this business, and we see a lot of potential. Oh, okay, great. That's unique. I mean, it's the actual practice of law, maybe not the special sauce to the actual firm in a sense, but it's special to that job, which can also be part of the special sauce.
Yeah. You touched on something way back in the conversation, which you've probably forgotten about, and our listeners have probably forgotten about, but I clued in on it, which is you were talking about, job descriptions that look generic, but, and that's boring and it's a lot of white noise, but there is kind of this balance between, well, it has to fit people's expectations, because people do have an expectation of what a job description is going to look like, but then it also has to stand out from the crowd. And that's something I walk that line in marketing a lot, right? It's like, if you're in this industry, you got to fulfill these expectations. You got to have to fulfill those expectations to a point. But then again, you have to figure out what differentiates you. So what does that look like on your end? How do you walk that line for your clients?
Yeah, I think part of it is not only the information itself, but how it's conveyed, right?
100%.
So if you look at a job description, most job descriptions are either like, this is what we need.
Yeah.
It almost is conveyed from a point of like, you'd be lucky to work here and get this job. Like, and I read that and I'm like, why would I even apply to this role? Like, they're not set. You can be honest and ethical and still have an approach that is a empathetic and talent seeking approach versus one that is, this is what we want. And if you don't meet this, then, and even if you do, good luck. Yeah. Right. We're looking for, blah, 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 blah. And, and so that's how most job descriptions are written. And I understand the impulse, right? Because you're trying to weed out initially. You don't want to sort through a million resumes to find what you're looking for, but you can still have that information in the listing. It's not like you can't be honest and say, this is the experience that we're seeking. But this is why this is a great opportunity. And so when I approach the market and, I conduct both cold outreach and have a warm pipeline. So I use a lot of different approaches to find talent. But when I'm conducting cold outreach, I just completely rewrite my outreach featuring, but I also don't want unqualified people, right? Like, so it's in everybody's interest to still be honest about the role. And I would never sell, if there's a firm and I know they're a hard charging firm and they're very demanding, I would never say, oh, this is a lifestyle role.
Like you're going to be on the beach sipping pina coladas. It's more like, no, like this is an intense, I won't say it's obviously an intense role, but I'll lead with the positive attributes of that role, despite the intensity. And a lot of candidates appreciate that, right? They know. So yeah, these are sophisticated people. And when you're targeting lawyers, the legal industry, especially in large markets like Chicago, it tends to be very specialized, right? So you're targeting people who, your pool of candidates might be 20 people. It might be 50 people, might be 200-300 people, who knows? But it's probably not thousands. So those people are already going to have an expertise and a discernment to those listings, no matter what. Sorry, I could go on and on.
Yeah, no, this is great. Please do. Yeah, no, so I want to talk a little bit more about identifying who the right candidate is. Because again, as a marketer, I'm always thinking, especially as an SEO person, like any SEO person can get you more traffic. Are they getting you the right traffic is the real question. Getting them to your website is just step one. What are they doing once they get to your website? Are they bouncing away? Are they maybe looking at a few pages and then bouncing away or getting lost? Or are they going through the process and then calling you and wasting your time because they're completely not the right fit and your messaging did not convey that? And there's, again, we talk a lot in marketing about the demographics, age and income and certain things that we're looking for that are very surface level. The more sophisticated people that I work with, when I ask about their ideal clients, are like, these are their pain points. This is the process they're going through. This is how they're thinking about this. This is someone who's really aligned with such and such would be also really aligned with us. They get more into the psychographics of their ideal client. So can you speak to that from an employment perspective as well? I mean, like you said, lots of candidates can have the right skills and not be a good fit for a particular position. So can you talk about how to weed those out and how to define that?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, interview process and speaking with candidates, there's no substitute, right? Like we live in the age of AI. I'm being approached by like AI interviews and all these things. Oh my gosh, I can't think of a worse idea, in my opinion, because having an interview, and I understand Zoom interviews or online interviews can be wonderful, but in-person interviews, this is my, I guess I'm I would never be accused of Gen Z, but having a vibe check, right? Like that to me is, and I used to have a small tour business here in Chicago. So I hired, this is non-lawyers, so it's a different, different type of ability. But I feel like, and I feel very confident of who I hired for the most part. Obviously some misses in there, but the vibe check was crucial, that in person, and you usually know pretty quickly. With legal, the nice thing about legal is the experience is the experience, right? And so obviously you want to spot check that during the interview process, making sure that they're not lying on their resume or inflating experience. But you can ascertain pretty quickly if they have the right type of experience for the role. There might be edge cases on that you need to do a little deeper dive. Once it's beyond that, it's motivation, it's ascertaining personality fit, a lot of other types of attributes that may be important for the role that I think are best discerned in that, which is, again, another type of communication, right?
Yeah. I do love that you brought up vibe check. I have another brand strategist that I love to connect with, and she recently was like, that is part of our process now for onboarding a new client, is we have to have a meeting to do the vibe check, because if the vibes aren't there, we have the right to say no to you as a client. So yeah, I love that. And I again, same with candidates, depending on their situation, may or may not be as aggressive as they should be about asking their own questions and doing their own vibe check and thinking, is this right for me? Do I want to work here?
Right. I always tell candidates, it is a two-way street, when you're communicating. And that's another point too, which is, make sure internally you're aligned with who you're, how you're conducting the interview process, who you're meeting with. I had one case where I spoke with a firm, and I really like this firm. It was just a little mistake on their part where I said, okay, I understand the group is small in Chicago. How collaborative are they across practice, across offices, if they're going to be working mostly across offices? And they were like, oh, we are so collaborative. We work together all the time. Everybody knows each other. And then the candidate met with a person, in a different office, and they were like, oh, you spoke with John? I don't know who that is. I've never met them. I mean, talk about a way of undercutting your own communications, right?
Yeah.
And
at
that
least
was
get your lies straight.
yeah. Well, and I mean, or you say you're honest, right? Like, I think most of the time being honest or most of the time, I maybe
I'll go with most of the time.
Most of the time,
occasional white lie is warranted.
Occasional white lie is warranted, but it's being honest. They were worse off by trying to say something 100%. That wasn't true. And if they had led with a place of, this is what the group, sure, we don't always work across offices, but we're really working, here's our strategy on how we're integrating our offices and whatnot. And this is what the path this is why, again, why this is a great opportunity. Here's the future. You can see it.
Yeah. Same with marketing. Marketing is always making promises, and you better be able to deliver on those promises. Because if you don't, who does that not speak well? I mean, that loses so much trust in so quickly, and gaining back trust that has been lost is so much harder than gaining it the first time. So yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to touch on, if we have
Go for it,
is, one thing that I think will be helpful advice for law firms is knowing how to convey news that, when things aren't going well for whatever reason, however, and that can apply to so many different things, making sure to communicate with your lawyers or anybody, any staff, how they're okay. Right. Like for example, I've spoken with candidates who are slow. Right. And a lot of times these tend to be junior candidates, junior associates who have no real control in how they're slow. And, being slow, obviously over the long term, firms tend to find a way out of that situation. Yeah. But a lot of times they're pretty forgiving at the junior levels because they understand how the process works, and they're not going to punish talent for something is out of their control. Communicate that, right? Like say, hey, I know your hours are light, but I know you're doing everything you can do. We're with you. We're working on it. Otherwise, they might lose that talent. And maybe that's by design, right? Like, but if you want to keep them, make sure to communicate it. Another example, partners leaving, right? I'm working with 70% of my work is from this one partner. They leave, they lateral to a new firm. How does that impact me? Am I toast here? Communicate. You're not toast. We know you've got a big portion of your work done from this client. Career path is another great example. Communicate the career path. And if it's an opaque process, and to be honest, despite what most law firms say, I still believe most of the time it is a pretty opaque process.
Yeah.
That's okay. Say, here's what we value. Here are the factors and right now you're on a great track, or you're not, and here's where we think you need to improve. Certainty is almost better than uncertainty, even if the news is bad.
100%. Awesome. Well, I have a bunch more questions for you, but we are out of time. So we are going to have to do this again. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Before we go, tell the good people where they can find you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure. You can find me, Christopher. I know there are a lot of Chris Whites on LinkedIn, but Christopher Bruce White, you can find me. Also, Navigate Legal Search, www.navigatelegalsearch.com. That also will find my boutique agency as well.
Awesome. And I, of course, am your host, Allison Verhalen. I am very grateful that I have a fairly unique name. At least my last name is pretty unique. So I think I'm the only Allison Verhalen on LinkedIn, especially if you spell my name correctly. And of course, my website is AV, as in my initials, Allison Verhalen. That is avwritingservices.com. And don't forget to check me out on YouTube, Allison Verhalen Content Marketer. Chris, this was so much fun. Thanks so much for doing this with me.
Real pleasure. Thank you, Allison.